ready, Your Honor? Very good.
Ms. Pearson, Jerry, Ms. Callahan, Mr. Middlebrooke, Mr. Barbesco, Jerry, don't push, Mr. Norton, and Ms. Down.
And there's no assigned seating, so you all may sit wherever you'd like in the jury box. We're just waiting for you. You can sit. We stand for you.
Thank you.
All right, you may be seated. Well, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm glad to see all of you came back. Thank you very much. I hope you all had a very good weekend. There's just a couple preliminary questions that I have of you all before we begin. You had a weekend off, so I just have to inquire, did anybody approach you or speak to you in any way about this case? I'm seeing everybody nodding in the negative. Is everybody nodding in the negative?
Yes, I did.
Yes, you did? Okay. Did anybody do any, I'm sorry, ma'am?
I asked.
And you said?
I can't talk about it.
All right, thank you. Perfect. Did anybody do any of their own research or investigation? Did anybody watch any read any news articles, watch any news programs? No. Wonderful, thank you. Madam Clerk, could you please swear in?
Can you all
Oops.
please stand?
Just
and
one
raise
second.
your right hand?
Council approach.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that you will well and truly try the issue between the state of Florida and the defendant and render a true verdict according to the law and evidence, so help you God?
Thank you.
All right, you may be seated. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you are now selected and sworn as the jury to try the case of the state of Florida versus Thomas Lewis. This is a criminal case. Thomas Lewis is charged with culpable negligence. The definition of culpable negligence will be explained to you later. As you know, the state's charging document, which is called an information, is not evidence and is not to be considered by you as any proof of guilt. It is the judge's responsibility to explain the law to you. It is your solemn responsibility to determine if the state has proved its accusations beyond a reasonable doubt against the defendant in accordance with the law that I provide to you. Thus, the province of the jury and the province of the court are well defined and they do not overlap. This is one of the fundamental principles of our system of justice. Before proceeding further, it will be helpful if you understand how a trial is conducted. At the beginning of the trial, the attorneys will have an opportunity, if they wish, to make an opening statement. The opening statement gives the attorneys a chance to tell you what evidence they believe will be presented during the trial. Remember, what the lawyers say is not evidence, and you are not to consider it as such. Following the opening statements, witnesses will be called to testify under oath. They will be examined and cross-examined by the attorneys. Documents and other exhibits may also be produced as evidence. After the evidence has been presented, the attorneys will have an opportunity to make closing arguments. Following the closing arguments by the attorneys, I will instruct you on the law applicable to this case. After the final instructions are given, the alternate juror will be released and you will retire to consider your verdict. You should not form any definite or fixed opinions on the merits of the case until you have heard all of the evidence, all of the arguments of the lawyers, and the instructions on the law by the judge. Until that time, you should not discuss the case amongst yourselves. Your verdict must be based solely on the evidence or lack of evidence in the law. I now instruct you again not to communicate with anyone, including your fellow jurors, about this case. No communication means no emailing, text messaging, tweeting, blogging, or any other form of communication. You cannot do any research about the case or look up any information about the case. If you become aware of a violation of any of these rules at any time during this trial, please notify court personnel of the violation. During the course of the trial, the court may take recesses and you will be permitted to separate and go about your personal affairs. Again, at night, as long as everybody is following the instructions and not doing research, not speaking to anybody, you will be permitted to go home and go about your personal affairs. During these recesses, again, you must not discuss the case with anyone, nor permit anyone to say anything to you in your presence about the case. If anyone attempts to say anything to you in your presence, tell him or her that you are on the jury trying the case and ask that person to stop. If he or she persists, leave at once and immediately report the matter to court personnel who will advise me. All cell phones, computers, tablets, or other electronic devices must be turned off while you are in the courtroom, not silent or vibrating mode. They must be turned off. You may use these devices during your recesses, but even then you may not use them to find out any information about the case or communicate with anybody about the case. Do not take any photographs, video recordings, audio recordings of the proceedings or your fellow jurors. After each recess, please double check to make sure your cell phone or electronic device is turned off. At the end of the case, while you are deliberating, you must not communicate with anyone outside the jury room. You cannot have in the jury room any cell phones or electronic devices. The case must be tried by you only on the evidence presented during the trial in your presence and in the presence of the defendant, the attorneys, and the judge. Jurors must not conduct investigation of their own. This includes reading newspapers, watching television, or using a computer, cell phone, the internet, any electronic device, or any other means at all to get information related to this case. This applies whether you are in the courthouse, at home, or anywhere else. Please do not visit any places mentioned in the trial during your recesses, or use the internet to look at maps or pictures of any places mentioned during the trial. Jurors must not have discussions of any sort with friends or family members about the case or people and places involved. So do not even let the closest family members make comments to you or ask questions about the trial. I want to stress that just as you must not talk face to face, again, you must not talk about the case using electronic devices. Do not discuss this case or ask for advice by any means at all, including posting information on an internet website, chat room, or blog. What are the reasons for these rules? These rules are imposed because jurors must decide the case without distraction and only on the evidence presented in this courtroom. If you investigate, research, or make inquiries on your own, the trial judge has no way to ensure that the information you obtain is proper, and the parties have no opportunity to dispute or challenge the accuracy of what you find. That is contrary to our judicial system, which assures every party the right to ask questions about and challenge the evidence being considered against it, and present argument with respect to that evidence. Any independent investigation by a juror unfairly and improperly prevents the parties from having that opportunity our judicial system promises. Any juror who violates these restrictions jeopardizes the fairness of the proceedings, and a mistrial could result, which would require the entire trial process to start over. A mistrial is a tremendous expense and inconvenience to the parties, the court, and the taxpayers. If you violate these rules, you may be held in contempt of court, and face sanctions such as serving time in jail, paying a fine, or both. In every criminal proceeding, a defendant has the absolute right to remain silent. At no time is it the duty of the defendant to prove his innocence. From the exercise of a defendant's right to remain silent, a jury is not permitted to draw any inference of guilt, and the fact that a defendant did not take the witness stand must not influence you to return a verdict in any matter whatsoever. The attorneys are trained in the rules of evidence and trial procedure, and it is their duty to make all objections they feel are proper. When an objection is made, you should not speculate on the reason why it is made. Likewise, when an objection is sustained or upheld by me, you must not speculate on what might have occurred had the objection not been sustained, nor what a witness might have said had he or she been permitted to answer. During the trial, it may be necessary to confer with the attorneys out of your hearing to discuss matters that require consideration by me alone. It is impossible to predict when these may occur or how long they will last. We will ensure that when they do occur, they will be conducted as to consume as little of your time as is necessary for an orderly trial of this case. You all, I believe, have notebooks there. If you would like to take notes during the trial, you may do so. On the other hand, you are not required to take notes. That will be up to you individually to determine whether you want to or not. as you are provided with a notepad and pen. Any notes that you take will be for your personal use. However, you should not take them with you from the courtroom. During the recesses, the court deputy will take possession of your notes and will return them to you when we reconvene. After you have completed deliberations at the end of this case, your notes will be delivered to me and I will destroy them. I also will not read your notes. No one will ever read your notes. If you do take notes, do not get so involved in note-taking that you become distracted from the proceedings. Your notes should be used only as aids to your memory of what occurs in trial. Whether or not you take notes, you should rely on your own memory of the evidence, and you should not be unduly influenced by the notes of other jurors. Notes are not entitled to any greater weight than each juror's memory of the case. Does the state wish to make an opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor.
Can you move the podium? No, it'll face the jury.
Sorry, thank you.
At this point, you have no information that somebody specifically checked the gun. Correct. Do you know where the loading of the gun occurred? You do not. Who was the hands-on person in charge of the scenario? That's a good question. Those are the answers from Chief Tom Lewis when he was giving a statement to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement in the early morning hours of August 10, 2016. Just a few hours after the tragic event at the Punta Gorda Police Department Citizens Academy where Mary Knowlton was shot and killed. On August 9th of 2016, 73-year-old Mary Knowlton, along with her husband Gary, went to the Punta Gorda Police Department for a Punta Gorda Chamber of Commerce police citizen. And the purpose of these events are somewhat educational, and it's also an opportunity for the police department to foster a relationship with the community. And they've done these academies many times before for different organizations, and the academy is broken up into different sections. So the night started at about 5:30, and the first portion of it's about a half hour long, and it's a welcome from the chief. And everyone goes into a conference room, and they sit down at some tables, and the chief has a PowerPoint presentation, and he goes over different things like the different departments, finance, the number of employees, just things like that. And in front of every person, there's a blue notebook that says Punta Gorda Police Department on it. And in 4 of those notebooks, Tom Lewis took one of his business cards, and on 2 of them he wrote taser, and on the other 2 he wrote something along the lines of shoot, don't shoot, and they were randomly placed. They were expecting about 50 people that night, but only about 40 showed up, so they had some extra seats. When everyone opened their notebooks, they realized that some of those empty seats contained some of the business cards from Tom Lewis. So Mary Knowlton turned around and grabbed a second notebook. And in that second notebook she grabbed had a business card that said, shoot, don't shoot on it. After the welcome from the chief, there's a tour of the police department. And everyone's broken up into 3 groups, and they go to 3 different departments for the tour. They go to evidence, the patrol division, and records, and they spend about 5 minutes at each. Tom Lewis was in charge of one of the groups. Captain Jason Shikini was in charge of a second group, and then Lieutenant Chris Salzman had the third. After that, everyone goes outside and they view what are called static displays. There's 3 of these. Static displays, like the first one is for the Marine unit, so there's a boat. They look at the boat, there's a presentation about this is what it is, this is what we use it for, this is the equipment. Same thing with a patrol car, and then as well as a bike. Again, each section's about 5 minutes. From the static displays, while they're still outside, you move on to the shoot, don't shoot scenario. There's 2 scenarios that are encompassed. Each scenario has 1 law enforcement officer and 1 citizen. And those citizens were the ones that were previously selected when they opened their notebook and found the business cards. The first scenario regarded a suspicious person call, and Mary Knowlton was going to be the law enforcement officer. Officer Lee Cole was going to operate as the perpetrator. So Mary Knowlton is briefed about the weapon she's going to use, and it's called a simunition weapon. A simunition weapon is basically, it's similar to a real weapon, but instead of shooting ammunition, normal ammunition, it shoots these detergent pellets. And she's going to be armed with this. So she's briefed about what's going to, well, actually, when the group is briefed by Tom Lewis, she is inside. She's brought outside. She's then told about this simunition weapon she's going to use. And the scenario starts. The scenario, as you will see, it has two police cars, and Mary Knowlton is to walk into the middle of them where Canine Officer Lee Cole is. She approaches to make contact. You'll see that, or hear that Lee Cole had a protective face mask on, and that's because simunition rounds are dangerous. Unbeknownst to Mary Knowlton, as she approaches with her simunition weapon, Lee Cole is to grab a firearm that he has hidden on the car. He's then to fire off some blanks in order to surprise her and see what her reaction is going to be. Will she shoot or won't she shoot? From there, you'd have the second scenario, which neither one are part of, and then you'd move on to classroom teachings, where tasers are discussed and different weapons are discussed. And then the night is finished with a question and answer portion. On August 9th, we never made it past the first scenario of the shoot, don't shoot. The purpose of these were to give citizens the idea of what it is that law enforcement faces every day. And it's not as clear-cut as to whether or not they should shoot or not shoot. It's a lot more complicated and stressful. This time, everything changed. They've done this numerous times, but this time, everything changed. You'll see for yourself exactly what happened. Florida Police Department has surveillance videos, and one of these videos captures the events of August 9th. You will see Mary Knowlton approach Lee Cole in between the two cars. He's pretending to be on a cell phone. She walks up with her simunition weapon, and it's a bright blue weapon, so that way you know that this is not a real firearm. As she's walking up, Lee Cole turns to walk away. She follows him, grabs something off the car, spins around, and starts firing. He fires in a very close distance to Mary Knowlton. The evidence will show you these were not blanks, as they were supposed to be. These were what are known as wad cutters. Mary Knowlton passed away that night after being shot. A wad cutter is a bullet that's specifically designed mainly for competitive shooting because it gives a clear-cut hole into a target instead of other ammunition that'll kind of flay out. So that's what the purpose of wad cutters are, and they're not necessarily as common as other ammunition, and they can look similar to blanks. Many things went wrong August 9th. Many people were involved, but today we are here because of the role that Tom Lewis took in that tragedy. Not the chief of police, the individual, Tom Lewis. You're going to hear a lot of testimony from the stand from different witnesses, and the majority of them are going to be Punta Gorda Police Department officers. Now what you'll see is that Tom Lewis is involved in almost every stage of the academy. You'll see pictures, you'll see an agenda of the academy. You will see that Tom Lewis is involved in almost all of it. He also assigned some of the officers to the roles. He told Captain Woodard that morning that he needed him. He needed Woodard to keep him on time. Told him to get the participants for the shoot, don't shoot scenario. Get the SINS weapon. The rain was coming in, we need to get going. Directing his officers basically how to conduct everything that night, because he was in charge of that scenario. Now, Mary Knowlton, a civilian who had never held a firearm in her life, was placed in a scenario with a trained law enforcement officer with a real firearm. Tom Lewis, also being a firearms instructor, recklessly switched to blank ammunition instead of using those detergent pellets so it would cause more of an impact. Mary Knowlton was in a situation where a law enforcement officer was going to have a real firearm in a very close distance to where she was. Now, you will hear that there were policies in place about what kind of firearms could be used and what couldn't while you're on and off duty, but there were no policies or procedures in place for this type of event, or this type of situation. You'll also hear that no one was designated as a safety officer, whose responsibility it would have been to check all firearms to make sure that the ammunition being used were actually blanks. No one was designated. Mary Knowlton had no protective gear on. Lee Cole did, because we know some ammunition weapons are dangerous, but Mary Knowlton had nothing to protect her. While captain before becoming chief, Tom Lewis was integral in developing and executing the shoot, don't shoot scenario based off of YouTube videos. Now, these are just some of the reasons as to why Tom Lewis is involved and why the individual Tom Lewis is being charged with culpable negligence. There's many little pieces, and when you start putting them all together, you get the bigger picture. That's why we're here today. There were other people involved that night. There were many other law enforcement officers there. You'll hear from most of them. But what will be overwhelmingly obvious to you is that no one knew what was going on, with who, with what, with anything. It was almost chaos that night. Lieutenant Katie Heck, at the time, was a community services supervisor. She had held that position for less than a year. And you'll hear how she wasn't even present that night. She wasn't supposed to be present that night. She was in charge of organizing the event in the sense of you need to make an agenda as to what happens at what time. And it's basically something that they already have in the computer, and she just changes the date and time on. You will hear that even though she organized this, she was never told that she needed to designate a safety officer. This was not something that she was supposed to do. You'll also hear, though, that the ammunition that Lee Cole used on August 9th, those wad cutters, were given to him by Katie Heck. In July, around the 4th of July, her and her husband were moving, both of them previously being K-9 officers, and so as they're cleaning out their stuff, they decide to get rid of a lot of ammunition. And K-9 officers, as you will hear, use a lot of blanks to train their dogs. And what she assumed what she was giving him was blank ammunition. So she brings it to work in a Publix bag, gives it to him, and says, hey, you need to check these. To this day, Katie Heck still has no idea how she came to have those wad cutters. You'll also hear that Captain Jeff Woodard was there. He's no longer a captain. He recently left the Punta Gorda Police Department. He also wasn't supposed to be there that night. Early in the morning at a staff meeting, Tom Lewis asked him to stay and asked him to make sure that everything was going to run correctly. He will tell you that he was never asked to be the safety officer to check the weapons. You'll hear that he did check this ammunition weapon, as did Tom Lewis, but he was never told, you are the safety officer, you need to check Lee Cole's weapon. You'll hear that Lieutenant Christopher Salzman was there. And again, he'll tell you, I was never designated as a safety officer. And he'll probably say something along the lines of, but it's everybody in uniform's responsibility to check. Lee Cole is somewhat responsible. He holds a big part of the responsibility for this. He fired that weapon You'll hear evidence that even if he followed every policy and procedure regarding firearms, Tom Lewis would still be guilty of culpable negligence. The state is not at any point saying that Tom Lewis is a bad guy. He never wanted any of this to happen. He never wanted Mary Knowlton to be hurt. He never wanted anything like this to ever occur at the Punta Gorda Police Department. He's beloved by his officers in his department. They're his subordinates, and the majority of them are his personal friends. And you will hear through their testimony how that kind of affects their testimony. Lots of errors were made on August 9th. But Tom Lewis showed a reckless disregard for Mary Knowlton. He knew, authorized, and sanctioned the use of a real firearm to make more of an impact.
Does the defense wish to make an opening statement?
Good morning, everybody. Again, I go second, so this is my first time going second here. Thanks for listening. And just remember, this is kind of the attorney's arguments, kind of a roadmap. You're going to hear all the testimony on the stand. Let me discuss some things with you a little further. The state either didn't discuss with you or to clarify some things of what the evidence is going to show you in this case. Let's be very clear about this. This incident happened. This tragedy happened. And absolutely, it's a tragedy. There will never be any issue in this case that what happened to Mary Knowlton was awful and should have never happened. And that's not an issue here. Nobody can test that. It shouldn't have. But it's not because Tom Lewis did something criminal. Tom Lewis didn't do anything criminal in this case. The evidence is going to show you that one person did two things that violated his training, the policies of the Punta Gorda Police Department, and the law, even according to the state. The state of Florida, as you'll learn in this case, has charged Lee Cole with manslaughter. This is what happened in this case. The shoot, don't shoot event was actually implemented before Tom Lewis was even the chief of police. There was a different chief. Tom Lewis did not even, because the other chief was there in 2015. Tom Lewis became the interim chief around September of 2015. And in that time, then the city did their investigation who we're going to name as the full permanent chief. And he was one of the candidates, but he was the interim at the time. So all of the things that had happened before he was the chief were already in place at the Punta Gorda Police Department. Policies were already in place. They all existed by the same things. The demonstrations had all gone on before. And you're going to hear evidence in this case that not only were there a shoot, don't shoot demonstration done before successfully, no problem. There were all kinds of demonstrations done throughout his 18 and a half years there that the canine officers did with blanks, where they'd go to middle schools and show kids this is what happens with it, where they would go to high school stadium areas, things like that, where they would use the blank gun, which is a gun that could fire a live round, but they're all trained in how to use it to fire a blank. And you're going to hear evidence that a blank is essentially, it's used for the noise. It's not used to shoot anybody. It's not used to shoot a projectile at somebody. And you're going to learn that the use of a blank can be dangerous if you're really close, as in either contact or very close proximity, because there's a concussion type of reaction from it when the gas pushes out. And there's a little piece of cardboard that keeps the gunpowder in, that the little piece of cardboard comes out. But there's not a bullet, there's not a projectile. So you can't put a blank gun against somebody and push it, because you could hurt or kill them because of the force. And you can't be real close to it because there may be hot gases, or that little piece of paper could cut or something. But from a distance of not really close, used properly, you're going to hear testimony that blanks are safe, and they've been used for years in public demonstrations. They're required to be used to train canine dogs. You can't certify a canine dog unless the dog you can show does not react to the loud sound of gunfire. Because when the officers release a dog at somebody who's shooting at them, they don't want the dog freaking out because of the loud sound of the gunfire. So they train them to get used to how loud that is. And you have to certify with blanks. You're going to hear that FDLE and all the certification things recognize that law enforcement is going to use blanks. And there is not anything that you're going to hear in this case that the use of a blank in a public demonstration somehow violates state law or any type of policy. They are used. And they're used safely. You're going to hear in this case that then, so this event's been going on. It's happened a few times. Lee Cole's been involved in it. Other officers have been involved in it. And what happened here is, as the state alluded to, around July 4th of 2016, approximately 1 month before this event is going to go down, Lieutenant Katie Heck, who is in charge of community services, and the evidence is going to show you it's more than she just makes up charts and plots things out. Her entire job, the reason they pay her, is to not only organize, but make sure all the proper personnel is at any community event. That's her job. Her title is Lieutenant involved with Community Services. That is a job that, and a position that the Chief of Police before Tom Lewis and the Chief of Police when it was Tom Lewis delegates to the person to say, your job is responsible to set these things up. And you're going to find a lot of the things that go from the flow of it are people have jobs and duties to do. And you're going to hear from the evidence that Tom Lewis, as the chief, has a right to expect they're going to do their duties. He has a right to expect they're going to follow the law, to follow department policy, to follow the training. And so with that expectation, this is set up. And you're going to find this was the Punta Gorda Chamber of Commerce. And it was very, when they announced it, it was very well, oh, we all want to go to it because it's an interesting thing, and they've done these things before, and they've seen it. And that's where this was happening. So at the time all of this is delegated to do, there is no issue that's been out there that anybody is going to do something to break any law, whether it's the department, their training, or state of Florida law. And there's no expectation that trained law enforcement officers are going to break department law or break state law. It's set up. And Tom Lewis's role there, and you'll see it from the itinerary, so it's set up. And as the state said, he gives the first introduction. He gives like a half-hour presentation with a PowerPoint about this is what your agency does, here's how we do our money, here's how this happens, here's how we save you money, etc. He's doing that. He then the whole time goes and takes a group of people on a tour. He's doing that. Then they go out to the static displays. He's doing that. And when it comes time for the shoot, don't shoot, his role and position there is he's still with the same people. He is the narrator. He is, okay, this is what's going to happen. The whole time that he's with the crowd and the people, which is the entire time, other officers are delegated the duty to set these other things up because Tom Lewis can't. He's giving all the speeches. He's the face of the organization. So, on July 4th, unbeknownst to Tom Lewis, the person and the chief, unbeknownst to everybody else at this event that night, Katie Heck, who was a canine person, and her husband, who worked for the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office, are cleaning out their garage in their house. They're going to move. Now, the Punta Gorda Police Department has a policy about ammunition. We either give it to you or we approve it. Short of that, you don't use it. And if you do want to use something like a little bit more, like, well, you know, I want to have some more bullets here with me, then you have to have the same model, make, and what we call grain, or they call grain. And grain is basically an identification of a projectile and how much it kind of weighs. So it tells you it's a bullet. Those are the rules. Katie Heck takes 3 boxes and tells Lee Cole, hey, I've got some boxes here. I know you shoot blanks. I think they're blanks. Why don't you go take them and check them out? She doesn't read the box. Husband doesn't read the box. And this is what you're going to learn about wad cutters. Wad cutters are basically akin to like the 8-track player in law enforcement. Okay? Wad cutters were used back in the day when police departments were issued revolvers, not semi-automatics. Well, that day was probably mostly in the 80s into the 90s. Your culture of law enforcement, you're learning the evidence today, guys that have 20 years experience, a lot of years of experience as law enforcement officers. These guys that are now the leaders in law enforcement, and their culture of law enforcement, what they're trained on, what they know, have never heard of a wad cutter, never used them, never saw them, never were trained on them. There is no class that says, hey, let's distinguish wad cutters from blanks. And why does that matter in this case? And you'll see the picture of it, because they look identical. A bullet has a case. You'll see this in the evidence. It has a cylinder case. That's what holds the gunpowder. Okay? But on top of a bullet, probably common sense will tell you all these things you see in a bullet, there's a dome, which is the projectile. This is what happens when the explosion happens, the projectile goes out and strikes the target or the person or whatever you're shooting. A wad cutter was created or was used basically in competitions and target practice with revolvers. The dome of a bullet, if it hits a paper target, as the state told you, smash it all over the place, you can't really tell where you hit it. The wad cutter, the bullet, is inside the cylinder. There is no dome. You hold a blank, you hold a wad cutter, they're both flat at the top. Neither one of them appear to be a bullet. Which logically, the evidence will show you, would explain what Katie had looking at it on that level is not seeing something with a dome on it. The evidence will show you that doesn't change the duty of what she needs to do with it or what Lee Cole needs to do with it. But they look the same. So she hands them to him. And here's something that the state didn't discuss in opening that you're also going to hear. So Lee Cole takes these. He doesn't go to the Punta Gorda Police Department, which he has the box, and you'll see the box. You'll get to read what's on the box. You'll get to see what the box says. And there's things in the box, and you'll see it in the evidence, which should have alerted to somebody, this is not a blank. Because the blanks that they use say the word blanks on them. The Punta Gorda Police Department, in February of 2016, purchased for Lee Cole. You'll see it. Purchased for Lee Cole. Appropriate, approved, actual, with the Winchester blanks. And the box says blanks. And he signed off on it. He knew we have blanks. In February. In March, he becomes permanent chief, full chief. He's named the chief. So this event happens 5 months after he is named chief. You're going to learn, though, that not only does he know they have blanks, Katie Heck knows they have blanks because she's the one that requisitioned it for Lee Cole in February. Because he was under her supervision. So now fast forward to July. He's been the chief for now 3-4 months. Things are running along. Katie Heck gives Lee Cole 3 boxes. One of those boxes is a wad cutter with a bullet in it. Lee Cole doesn't go to the department and say, hey, I know these aren't what you normally give me, but if we could use them, let me know, because I know there's a policy that I have to get them approved. There'll be no evidence of that. No, the first thing that the next evidence you see happen is about 2 weeks before the shoot, don't shoot. Lee Cole goes to do training. He's trained here every month with the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office. He's the only canine officer in the Punta Gorda Police Department. And to make sure he's still getting proper training, Chief Lewis has him set up to train with the certified trainers at the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office, of which they have many more canine people in a much bigger agency, obviously. So he goes to a training session there. And that training session is going to end, and a community event is going to start right afterwards. And Lee Cole's going to play a role in it. So he goes there with the same gun, same person, same ammo. Now, in the evidence there, you're going to find out that he is in the presence of one of the training officers. One of his training officers, who comes over and Lee Cole has the blanks out. Thanks for blanks. And the training officer, who knows what blanks they use, knows what Winchesters are, is out. Did you get new blanks? And they go and make some kind of statement like, yeah, they're cheaper. Which we'll talk about that later. And a discussion comes up about, well, do these blanks make a loud enough noise for this public demonstration? I don't know. Let's test fire one. Loads them. Number of Charlotte County Sheriff's officers are around. Goes down, shoots. You're going to hear evidence that at least 2 of the people there look down and they see what appears to be the dirt move. Now, again, the experience and culture and age of law enforcement now, you're going to hear, does not deal with wad cutters. They don't know what wad cutters are. They know we're supposed to be using blanks. They know what blanks look like. And so in the moment of going, how would that happen, you're going to hear there's discussion about that. But that discussion, although not directly, nobody goes to Lee Cole directly and says, hey, what did you just do here? They're standing in a group, and it's brought up. How'd the earth move? And because none of them know what a wad cutter is, like, well, maybe it was like the gas or something, or what, they just kind of like dismiss it and blow it off. Nobody alerts Chief Lewis to this. Nobody alerts the Punta Gorda Police Department to this. Nobody asks to see the box. One person saw the box. Will tell you it wasn't a Winchester blank. It was definitely different. So now we come forward now to the case. You're going to hear a lot of things that once this tragedy happened, that looking back, a lot of this, well, you didn't have this policy, and you didn't do this, and you didn't do that. You're going to hear a lot of that in this case. Okay? And you're going to be instructed later about what the intent and the elements are for this charge against this man. Okay? And so a lot of the things that came up there, I think are going to be contested as to whether there was an issue, like some of the things the state said, and I will discuss what the evidence will show on that in a minute. But the bottom line is that when the element of what is in this case of exposure to personal injury is looked at, this is the evidence of how Mary Nolan was exposed to personal injury. It wasn't because somebody didn't write on a piece of paper, designated safety officer. Because what Lee Cole did, the evidence is going to show you, is he defeated the entire safety check process by introducing something so archaic and so unknown to this culture of law enforcement that even if they had done 5 checks of his gun, 3 checks, you're going to hear testimony from the officers that were doing the checks. If I had looked at it, I would have said, no, it's a blank. Go. He defeated the safety checks by bringing this in, by not just going and getting it checked. So now it's in his gun. You're going to find that while he's out there, and there's a tape of this, and you're going to find that no less than 3 officers are dealing with him before this thing even starts. He's got the gun out. He's Jeff Woodard, which, by the way, when the state says the state said, told you the evidence is going to show that Chief Lewis asked Jeff Woodard to stay and asked Jeff Woodard to do these things. The evidence isn't going to show you that. The evidence is going to show you that Jeff Woodard showed up that morning. He was not scheduled to do this. Jeff Woodard used to be the training officer for 5 years. The training officer is the person in charge of the armor. The training officer is the person in charge of checking the weapons. Jeff Woodard previously has done safety checks at previous demonstrations. And he'd done it for years. But he showed up on this morning in his Class A uniform, the long sleeve, which is not normal. He showed up with that. And so Chief Lewis said, what are you doing in your Class A's? Is there something special you're going to today? That's our dress-up stuff. He said, no, I wanted to stay and do this thing tonight. Do you want me to do that? He goes, sure, if you want to do that. He goes, anything I can help you with? He said, yeah, help keep moving it along and make things sure running smoothly, sure. Because when you read the itinerary for the shoot, don't shoot, it's going to show 4 names. that are involved in it. Now, it doesn't have written next to it designated safety officer. You're going to hear testimony that you don't need a designated safety officer written down because all the law enforcement officers know that we have to make safety checks. It's an inherent part of law enforcement when you're dealing with the public. They're trained that way. They know that. So he looks at the list. Lee Cole, well, he's going to be one of the role players. Shane Chodakowski, he's going to be one of the role players. The second incident involves two officers, and they look like they're shoving each other. And what happens is one of them turns to go to the citizen who's got the sim gun. And on the heels of the first one where the blanks went off and they said, you know, hey, you didn't shoot, you would have been shot. When they rush at them, you're going to hear in the evidence that most people then fire on a guy with no gun in his hand. So then they discuss, why did you shoot at somebody when you didn't see a gun versus this, to kind of show them the split-second reactions law enforcement has to make. So Chodakowski's going to be in the pushing thing with Lee Cole in the second one if it ever came back. So Tom Lewis' name is on there. He knows he's going to be doing all of the narrating and, okay, here's what's happening and here's what's going on this. He's not doing the gun checks. It's not his job that night. Never does those things as a narrator. He's with them the whole time. He doesn't take the citizens into the armory and say, wait here while I do checks. He has other people to do that. He has a right to expect they're going to. So you're going to see on the list, the fourth person on there is a person named Chris Salzman. Who's Chris Salzman? He's lieutenant in charge of what? In charge of training. The same thing Jeff Woodard was. The armory, the guns, the checks. And he's on there. And where everybody says, well, I wasn't sure what my role was or not, Tom Lewis looking at it knows what your role is. When the state read to you in the beginning here that the evidence is going to show that who was supposed to be doing what, that's a good question. That statement came at 1 in the morning, I believe. This incident happened with the shooting sometime around 6:37, somewhere in there. And on scene now, with all the things going on and where people are going, how did this happen? Because they just can't, from what the evidence is, how did a live round get in a blank? That statement is a reflection of things now heard. That's a good question now. Not because I never knew or expected somebody to be doing this, but now in the aftermath, when people are talking, and everybody's going, well, I don't know if I checked, or who checked, or this one checked, and he's like, who did the check? I knew I expected to be doing checks. That's when that statement's made. So that's not like, I didn't know, I just walked in here, I don't know who's doing what. That's at 1 in the morning, after a very long, obviously painful day. Lieutenant Chris Salzman will tell you, I anticipated I was planning on doing all safety checks until Jeff Woodard undertook that responsibility. Because Jeff Woodard came into the meeting there and basically indicated, I'm going to go to the armory and start taking care of the guns. Which to Lieutenant Salzman was, you're doing the checks. But you don't have to just rely on what he said to Chris Salzman. Here's what else the evidence is going to show you Jeff Woodard did. Jeff Woodard goes into the armory to do the checks on this ammunition gun. Now that's what the citizen's going to have, the untrained person. So they're checking the gun the untrained person's going to have. He goes through, clears it. He goes and gets the ammunition. He brings in or has a second officer come in as the secondary check. Detective DeVault, I need you to check these bullets with me as I load them. And they load them, 18 of them. Check, check, load, check, check, load, 18 of them. Closes it up. With DeVault, they are making sure, doing the safety check that Woodard has undertaken. He then goes and gets the taser cartridges from the right place because there is going to be, it goes all the way through, a demonstration with tasers in which they have to use a particular cartridge. Gets those. Makes sure the gun is fine. He then goes outside, and you'll see on tape, he runs into Lee Cole. He goes to Lee Cole. Goes up to Lee Cole, and Lee Cole goes, yeah, I don't have my gear. Well, you need your gear. He's like, well, where's your gear? I don't know. Well, I'll make sure you have your gear. Safety check. Goes and gets the gear. The gear is kept in his storage place that you'll see Jeff Woodard leave. He comes back. He's got the mask, the protector, the chest, taking this role to give him what he needs. And then you see him walk around. They're talking for a while. They're on video for a while. At any moment, could be open it up and look. But to be fair to Jeff Woodard, Captain Woodard, he'll tell you, I didn't look at the gun. But even if I had looked at the gun, I wouldn't have known that that thing was a wad cutter. I would have said, it's a blank? Yes, blank, we're good, you're good to go. You see Lee Cole pull up his shirt to show the gun. And Jeff Woodard recognizes, okay, it's not a Glock, it's not what we are issued that shoots bullets, but he doesn't check it. Tom Lewis the whole time is talking to people, hosting. Other people are setting up, doing safety checks. They are being done in this case. Then you're going to hear the evidence is not going to show you that Tom Lewis tells Captain Woodard, we need to hurry up everything. That's Captain Woodard doing it. There's rain coming in, and they're getting done with static events. And he comes over and basically says, hey, we're ready, let's go, we're doing this. Again, through Tom Lewis's eyes, my training officer of X number of years, who I know is gone and taking care of these things here. I know my other training officers also. If they're telling me we're ready to go, has the right to expect these things are going to be done. So they go, and it starts. And you hear from other witnesses, it doesn't look any different than any other scenario coming up. Nobody comes up and goes, you know, hey, is this wad cutter okay to use? No, there's none of that. It just starts. And you're going to find they bring Miss Knowlton out after Jeff Woodard has given her instructions in a training room how to use a sim gun. And they bring her out. And when they bring her out to Chief Lewis, and you'll see the pictures, even though Chief Lewis is just narrating there, he further goes over this with Miss Knowlton. Okay, so you understand everything he said there. You understand what these are. They have soap pellets in them. You'll see the picture. He's holding it up. There's a picture of it. Somebody captured doing it. Where he's explaining more to her. Okay? The evidence is not that he's reckless. He doesn't care what happens to her. He's explaining it to her. Okay. Then Jeff Woodard, when he's done explaining to her, Tom Lewis then explains to the crowd what's going on. While Jeff Woodard takes Miss Knowlton over to a different place and gives her yet more instructions. You'll see all this on tape. And when it's ready to go, Jeff Woodard, who at that point is running the scenario, because he starts it, and the person that runs the scenario at the end, when all the blanks and everything goes off, will yell, end scenario. So all the role players know, okay, everybody relax, we're done, now let's discuss it. Commences the operation. And it starts. Here's the second rule Lee Cole broke that you're going to hear from the evidence. It is a basic tenet you're going to hear from the evidence, that in any use of guns, there are some cardinal rules. In fact, the Punta Gorda Police Department pre-prints a form that they make every officer sign as they're getting trained, as they're retraining, recertifying, and it says cardinal rules of the Punta Gorda Police Department on firearm safety. And on those cardinal rules, there's 4 of them. But there's 2 that jump right out in this case. First one is, don't point the gun at anybody. Don't point. The box of blanks that Chief Lewis requisitioned to give to Lee Cole, on the side of it, warns you about pointing. He is trained as a canine officer, the evidence is going to show you, about not pointing. You're going to hear evidence that when they fire for the dogs, down inside, not at the dog. Certainly not at people. And good thing there's a video here, because you're going to get to see how Lee Cole used that training. And there's a policy that says, do not use your gun, any weapon, recklessly. Or you'll see the terms of it, carelessly or flippantly, those type of terms. So what does Lee Cole do when this goes down? The way the scenario is supposed to work is Miss Knowlton's supposed to come around and say basically, hey, what are you doing by the car? Why are you bothering me? I'm just checking my girlfriend's car. I got a cell phone. What are you doing, sir? What are you doing? She's already got the gun out. Okay? It's not her gun that's going to be the issue here. It's not the citizen's gun that's going to be the issue here. She's doing what she needs to be doing, what they told her to do with it. It's a trained law enforcement officer who's had all this training and knows what to do that becomes the problem of exposing her to something. Who's brought in this wad cutter that defeats all safety checks, and then this is what happened. And you'll see it. It isn't he grabs the gun, and the state said, oh, he grabbed the gun and fired some rounds. He grabbed the gun, and he brings this gun up with both hands, and he's doing this kind of back thing like this, level. This man, I think, is 6'7". 6'7", and brings that gun up. And you'll see it. You'll see in the evidence, there's a line on the wall, kind of like the line behind you all here in the jury box. There's a line on the wall where he is. And you can see that his arms in that line are pretty much right with each other. This is not this. The evidence will show you all he was supposed to do was pull it and go, pop, pop. Okay, sound happened. You would have been shot before you fired. Why didn't you shoot me? What were you thinking? That's how it works. He does this. And when he does this and pulls the gun, you're going to hear in the evidence there, with his hands, and pulls the gun is like, dips down. But it's level. It dips down from the force of doing this. And the bullets, because there's a car between them, hit the hood of the police car and ricochet, and that's how shot ends up resulting in this tragedy. That is how this case happened. Lee Cole's the person, the evidence will show you, exposed her to it. All this other stuff about what you could have done was, you didn't have a designated safety officer, but the evidence will show you they were doing safety checks. When the state mentioned to you the fact that Captain Lewis was integral in developing this from a YouTube video, he was not the chief when it was brought in. The chief brought it in and said, I saw this and we're going to implement it. And you'll have evidence when he does that, he gives it to the people that are going to implement it. And there was a different community services person that was going to be tasked with implementing it. You're going to hear more than that. This should give you a roadmap of what's going on here. Evidence in this case is going to point at two policies that just followed, we wouldn't be here. And it has nothing to do with the fact that Chief Lewis, in having this happen and trusting his officers and doing things the way they need to be done for this, which has gone on before successfully without a hitch. It's because he was trying to expose anybody for culpable negligence to commit a crime. And so you will hear evidence here about, well, what policy was written here and what policy was there. The truth is there's a policy that's been in effect the whole time. And that policy is, don't bring in ammo, that's not ours, that we don't approve or issue. Don't point your gun at anybody. You better treat it as it's loaded. That's what happened here. Thank you.